Hello and welcome to the Nintendo Switch Online Game Club, the show where we play through the games available on Nintendo's various NSO apps completely at random. I'm your host, Derrick Bittner, and in this episode, I'm joined by Naveed Mohebbi, occasional YouTuber and game collector maestro.
Hello, yes, that's me.
And Digimanda, teacher, all the respect there, and streamer who's all about those Digimon. How you doing, Amanda?
Hey, how you guys doing?
Glad to have you both on here, and as you're both likely aware, there are now over 200 games across the NSO, and while some are widely known like Super Mario Bros. And Zelda, there are some odd picks that could be hidden gems we honestly don't know. So what we'll be doing is entering all those games into a randomizer, picking one, and then giving our initial thoughts. And this week, the Wheel of Games has chosen Light Crusader from Treasure, which we found out at the end of last episode. We were so perplexed by this choice that we kind of ended up talking about it a little bit because for those who haven't seen it, none of us are familiar with this game whatsoever. I actually did grow up as a Genesis kid, but it was at the time where I wasn't really picking my games. I didn't read magazines at the time, so it was just like my parents being like, this looks fine, or I was like, that box art looks cool, I'll grab that. It's not really modicum of taste, really.
Sure. I mean, when I was a kid, I had a PS1, and the only thing I would rent was Rugrats Search for Reptar. So I very much know what you're talking about there when it comes to that. But yeah, like I didn't know anything about Light Crusader either. I'd like to think I know a decent amount of games, but for some reason, some games on the Genesis just like, they're out there and I don't know anything about them. But hearing that it was from Treasure got me pretty excited. So we'll see how it is.
Yeah, I only had a Super Nintendo. That was my first console growing up. I never owned any Sega Saturns or Sega Genesises or anything. Genocide?
Oh, let's go with Genocide.
I thought about that.
Mega Drives.
Yeah.
Mega Drive. That's a lot easier to make plural. Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't own any Sega systems at all. My friends all had the Sega Dreamcast. That was really like my only dabbling. So,
God, you guys making me feel old because I grew up with the NES. So like,
I mean, that was the first console I remember playing. The NES. I just didn't own one, and I didn't get like my own console until my parents got me like a PS1 and stuff. But I played a lot of stuff that family had.
Nice.
My first system ever was the Commodore 64. So
okay, that's all props. Who knows? Maybe you would have enjoyed our last game because that was originally for the Commodore 64 and Amiga. So
really,
yeah, Bomboozle was ported to SNES later by Kemco because
I heard it wasn't very good though.
No, it's not. No, it's definitely not. Fortunately, I have the feeling that we're in for a much better game, if only because it's from Treasure. Treasure doesn't always put out hits, but when they're on, they're on. And I did bring up the wiki article, just get a sense of what we're in for. And I actually, when I first saw this, I was thinking of its sister game, kind of, Landstalker, which was one I thought was Zelda-like. This is definitely an action RPG, but not a very long one, because on How Long to Beat, and that your mileage may vary on that one. The main story is 5.5 hours, and even just completionist is 10.5 hours. So even though it's an RPG, I think it's kind of feasible to beat this one. I mean,
yeah.
Obviously, if time comes up and life happens, you can't beat it. That's fine, get as far as you can. But I'm going to be doing my best to try to beat this this week.
Yeah, I think it's definitely reasonable, especially with like that 5 to 6 hour time range, depending on also how difficult it is. Because I know Treasure games can be pretty hard. They definitely, like stuff like Gunstar Heroes and even Mischief Makers. Those games are pretty tough. So I mean, we'll see how this one is. Old school style. It can be tough.
As you said, I'm a teacher, so I don't have a lot of time in the day. But 5.5 hours seems reasonable, so long as I don't get stuck, which I may. I don't.
It's NSO, so feel free to use that rewind feature. Feel free to use a guide. It's one of those things. My thing I've kind of leaned on doing through this is go as far as I can without using those features, other than just, hey, I need to stop now. Let me just save here and pick up where I left off. Until it gets really tough. I'm like, okay, I need to see what goes beyond this. So now I'll use the rewind and try to make this happen. But Treasure can be tough, but it usually is like, they're not like you lost all your lives, start over from the beginning. If you work at it, you can
Sure.
typically get through. So
Sure. Yeah. And they're not like the hardest games out there for sure, but that rewind feature and everything, the save states, those are going to help too. So, I mean, there's definitely a good chance of beating this one, I think.
And listen, if I was able to beat SimAnt as a child, maybe I can do this. I don't know.
that is some patience. I did not have any patience for sim games as a kid.
You have to take over the whole house as an ant. Like, it's just bonkers.
Why isn't that on NSO? Come on.
I know. They
Good
should put that.
question.
They did have a Super Nintendo re-release of SimAnt, but I don't know if it was any good.
Probably not.
Could you like kill ants in like really weird ways in that game, or am I crazy?
I think good. I think there was like a weird
Okay.
sandbox mode, but
Okay.
it's a little off topic to Light
Yeah,
Crusader.
it is.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Light Crusader.
it's fine. It's fine to go off topic. You never know where these conversations may head. I'm not gonna stymie our creativity at all. So, yeah,
It was also an isometric RPG though. So,
there you go.
well, I don't know about RPG, but you were role playing as an ant.
Yeah,
Sort of. Sort of.
But I like that there's this gap that we all have in Genesis, and honestly, Genesis games is kind of what inspired this. Just because I owned a Genesis and I looked at a lot of these games and says I've never played these, and it's funny I've already gotten 2 Genesis games that I've never played before. So happy to fill in those gaps. And unless we have anything else to say, I guess we'll break here and come back soon for our thoughts on Light Crusader.
Absolutely. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Hey, you. Now, sir.
Give me the Cyber Razor Cut.
Cyber Razor Gun.
They're over 100 megabyte games. They get faster, they get harder.
What are you going to do to keep up?
Who's next?
To be this good, they say.
And we're back after a week of playing Light Crusader, the final game from Treasure for the Sega Genesis in a genre they rarely attempted. I'm very curious what all of us thought about this one, but let's start with you, Amanda. What did you think about Light Crusader?
Light Crusader was actually a delight. It was one of those very odd kind of like RPG action platformer puzzle mixes that I don't really get to see very often. The closest thing I kept thinking about was Vagrant Story, and Naveed might also agree with this in some regard, but it had like a lot of the same like kind of puzzly, actiony fighting things. But I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. What about you, Naveed?
I also quite enjoyed it. I will say, when I started the game, I thought I wasn't gonna like it. I was like, I don't know about this one. Like, it looked a little bit weird. It looked a little more like, not like I enjoy RPGs, but it seemed like a type of RPG style that I wouldn't like. It's more of an action game, or an action puzzle game. And yeah, no, I really liked it. I loved the fact that it had a bunch of puzzles in there. I like that there was actually some nuance to the combat once you started to learn it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I didn't realize that, but once you start to actually get into it, I did start to enjoy the combat a little more. And yeah, I mean, it's very weird in a lot of places, and I love weird things. So pretty good surprise, I would say, for Light Crusader for me.
I think I fall in the same general range as you two, because when I first started up, I'm like, okay, I get what they're doing, but I'm not sure if I'm feeling it. Like, it feels like it's impossible to get the right hitbox for enemies. I feel like I'm swinging and missing a lot of times. Nothing's quite clicking for me. But you stick with it, get a little farther in, and all of a sudden, things start clicking. And as you said, Naveed, combat opens up a bit. You see the nuances of certain aspects, and you realize very quickly this isn't an RPG. There's no leveling at all.
Yeah.
You find ways to improve yourself, but you're not going to just earn experience just from killing a bunch of enemies. This is mainly an action adventure puzzler, I guess. Heavy emphasis on puzzles because my God, they range in this game. There are so many different types of puzzles, and I think that caught me off guard the most. Like, there's some that stick out for me, but what about you, Amanda? Like, which ones stick out for you? Like, do you have the same effect? Like, oh God, they're testing my brain. How dare they?
So much Simon Says, basically. I wanted to die because I'm like, oh, it's getting faster. There's so much
It's so
of it.
long.
Yeah, it's weird because they went from like an easy one to like there was like only 4 that you had to do, and then I think the next one after that I did was like 12 different ones that you had to do.
Yeah, there's
so
another
many.
like
One of them was, like,
15.
I think one of them lasted like 3.5 minutes. I'm like, I want to die, but that's okay. That's fine. This is not a criticism of the game. It was just that the Simon Says portions, I'm like, why did this have to be so big? But no, other than that, I really liked a lot of the puzzles. Naveed saw me struggling with the first one that I think you popped in for when I was streaming it, but it was really fascinating because there's like, you have to push like barrels, but the barrels sometimes don't cooperate, which was a relic of its time. But I really did like the timing for the barrels. I thought it was really like ingeniously done for the time period that it came out for. I liked it. It was good.
Lots of pushing in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this game, there's a ton of puzzles where you have to go around and like push the barrels around and push like giant boulders and balls around, and like it's so funny because like immediately when you start the game, you start to try and go to talk to all the villagers and the king and whatever, and you realize you can push everyone around like themselves, like the people around. So you're like, okay, maybe this is something I got to remember. It's like a mechanic I'm gonna have to do. So like, yeah, it's crazy how much they just like push you in there like immediately and like kind of show you what you're gonna be able to do mechanically. So yeah, there's lots of pushing puzzles, and a lot of them towards the end of the game got really hard. I definitely had to use a guide for a couple of the puzzles there because I was stumped.
Same.
I mean, even the first part when you were like, remember how Zelda has things where sometimes you can push the graves? And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Time to push every grave.
I could see people getting stuck without even going into the dungeon portion of this game and being like, where do I go? Like, because there is a little indicator for that grave at the very beginning that looks like it had slid over. But if you miss that and you don't really understand, like, you could just get lost.
It's easy to miss the detail because the camera is pulled back kind of far for a game like this. You expect it to be kind of in there and to have a nice big sprite, but no, your main character, David, I believe his name is kind of tiny in the grand scheme of things. He's just lanky and thin. It's a very different art style than you'd expect.
So ugly. Yeah. His
oh my God.
Was so ugly.
Everybody in this game is ugly. Oh my God.
But specifically David, we got to talk about David.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm going to start from the beginning. When you see the opening little cutscene, which is like surprisingly cinematic, by the way, like he's just riding his horse through the forest and stuff like that. And then the credits start coming in with the developers and stuff. I thought that was really cool. But then like it goes close up on his, like, oh, that's not a hero I would expect from a game like this, you know, like, yeah, very, very weird. And the other characters, their little sprites in the box is not much better either. So, very weird character design.
Yeah.
I was shocked. Naveed's like, look at his portrait. I'm like, oh my God.
Like, I think they're attempting Fabio-like hair, but it's so curly and messy and yikes.
Fabio
his
with
forehead,
a little,
like back here. He
yeah,
had like
a little
hairline,
bit.
like
A little male pattern baldness, Fabio.
Heroes come in all ages.
Yes.
And I particularly loved some of the characters in the town themselves, like the one lady who cannot play piano, but it takes up 75% of her house.
That got a good laugh out of me. It's like, let me play the tune for you, and she does it like awful. It's like, I'm not very good.
Ma'am, that's 75% of your home. Maybe you should dedicate some more time to practicing. You don't even have anything else in this house, basically.
I got. Okay, Nivi. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and then there's also the painter that has like the 3 portraits, an eye, lips, and then an eye. It's just like that emoji like meme that people do, or put the eye and the lips and the eye. Yeah, it's very weird.
There's a definite sense of humor to this game. Not always apparent, but it's there. Like there's one of the big things you got to do is David is rescue a bunch of people. You don't have to, but if you find them, you rescue them, and it fits into the story. You don't really get anything out of it. But one of the people you that you rescue towards the end is this woman with a frying pan beating up on her captor. I loved it. She was just beating up on the goblin and just like, help me, help me. And I'm like, I think you're fine. I think you're good.
Did you see her in the castle?
I think so. Yes.
Initially? Yeah, she's like a cook or something, I think, in one of the rooms, and she'll tell you like not to jump in the fire or whatever because it'll hurt you. Like, well, it's cooking a chicken or whatever. Like, and then you see her down there, yeah, like hitting an ogre. So
Yeah, I jumped
very
up on
cool.
the thing because I thought I could pick that meat up, and she got mad at me.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we'll break it down here. We're going to combat first, and so the sort of like getting into how we all kind of started, because you get in there and you only have the sword, and I kept hoping that your range would increase as you got better swords, because there's equipment for your sword, your armor, and then your like gauntlet. And I couldn't tell you what the gauntlet does at all. I have no idea what the gauntlet does.
I didn't. I mean, I assumed it was extra defense, but I didn't know. Like, I couldn't tell.
Yeah,
Yeah, nope.
I got nothing. But as you proceed further, I just kept figuring, like, accidentally learning things like, oh, hey, I can actually hit back their projectiles. I didn't know that. Oh, hey, you get these spells that are one-time uses. Turns out you can combine them. I didn't know that. And all of a sudden that was helpful. It's one of those ways of how it just opens up and all of a sudden the combat becomes really fun. That said, there's a lot of enemies where finding their hitbox is a pain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it's like in this isometric style, because that also plays into a lot of the puzzles, that it got a little bit difficult because of that perspective. But yeah, trying to hit some of those enemies was definitely not easy.
Half the time I was like inside them. I'm just kind of like like I literally
hit
for
you
the
here,
first
right?
slime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the slimes at the very beginning, I'm like, how close do I have to get to these things? And it's literally like me hit, them hit, me hit, them hit. I'm just like, how do I hit you?
So
I don't think
like,
I have really got a good like handle on that, even at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, like one part of the combat that I learned over time to go along with the stuff you mentioned, Derrick, was I turned on the damage like you did, where the numbers pop up when you hit an enemy, and I noticed when I was hitting them on their back, it was doing more damage. So I would end up trying to like hit them in the back and then move around and then hit them in the back again. And I think that also helped me not get hit as much, because when I started the game, I was just going straight up to them and just mashing and trying to attack, and that allows them to get attacks in too. So going in and then moving away a little bit, going back in, that kind of helped me get a handle of things and not get hurt as much.
I think I had the same effect on me, because I noticed that like just subtly me like adjusting myself to better suit that style and take advantage of those moments. I'm assuming all of us left the auto item use on, because usually that's an annoyance, but God, it's helpful in this game.
Yeah, it took me a while to figure out how it really worked, like what constituted the item being used. But I think at some point I figured out that it was depending on what item you have in your inventory, it'll be used whenever it'll put you to max health. So if there's like an item that recovers 30 HP, you lose 30 HP, it's going to use it, so you get back to max health. And then if you have one that recovers all your HP, it won't use it until you're all the way down to like 0 health. So that was cool. I definitely kept that on.
And it felt like fairies in Zelda, kind of, but like partial fairies. I don't really know how else to put it.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to think about it, actually.
Yeah.
And it took me a little bit, because I didn't always let myself die, but I try not to let myself. I used the rewind function a few times just to prevent myself from dying. But if you have pendants, those are your extra lives, basically. You'll come back in the same room with full health and get to try again. But the game is generally not too difficult. There are just certain moments where it will just like nail you. Like certain bosses wore me down pretty quickly, even just certain enemies. But then there's others where it's just a cakewalk, and it's a very varying degree of difficulty a lot of the times, it felt.
Platforming in this game, I think, was the thing that was my worst part. I could not. It's the isometric style. It's a 2D game trying to use like a more 3D dimensional aspect. And I'm like, I don't know where anything is. I'm going to jump and hope I land on something. And half the time I landed in spikes. So.
Yeah. Or even just knowing what level they're at, like the height wise.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you guys use the D-pad more, or did you use the analog stick? Because I started with the D-pad thinking like, well, it's how that was played on the Genesis. This should probably be more comfortable. And then I just sort of naturally drifted to the analog stick, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this controls so much better.
I was the D-pad, unfortunately.
Oh no.
I used the analog stick. I kind of switched like randomly while I was playing, but I used the analog stick more often. I think I remember actually while watching Amanda play the beginning of the game when she started, I was like, oh man, the analog stick actually works surprisingly well here, which I wouldn't expect.
It's smooth. Like it almost feels like it's built for it. It's crazy.
I know. Very, very strange, honestly. Like I wouldn't expect that, but yeah, no, it worked really well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about puzzles. I think that's the other kind of big thing.
Wait. Before we do that,
sure,
I did want to, since we were talking about combat a little bit, the magic stuff.
Oh yeah.
Did you notice how similar it felt kind of to Gunstar Heroes, if you guys have played that game?
Yeah, you're right.
The icons were similar, and they were all in the little round balls. I thought they were kind of playing back to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you can combine those powers in Gunstar Heroes, I think you can only do like 2 at a time in that game, but in this,
all 4.
you can do all 4 and mix and match between them. Yeah.
You got your heal spell. You got your thing that'll cure poison. You have this guardian spell that brings out a fairy that I couldn't tell you what it does. There's all kinds of different elements. Like it's pretty in depth as far as what you want to use and how you want to manage all of it. Although I'll be honest, I still ended up using melee most of the time because
me too.
It's limited use, so I'm like hoarding it until at the very end where they give you like 99. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to use my magic and use my heal spell 10 HP at a time, but I'm getting away and healing, so that's all that matters to me.
It honestly kind of had I know this is really weird. It reminded me of Final Fantasy VIII because you have your magic as items, and those items are exhaustible. So it felt, obviously you're not putting it in stats or anything like that, but it felt like it's an exhausted resource, which I thought was fascinating. Like you never really see magic done that way much before this. I guess Gunstar Heroes would have been probably the first, right?
I think.
I don't know.
I'm not too aware. Yeah, maybe.
But I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
It felt good as like a resource management kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I use Earthquake mostly at the beginning.
I use fire the most.
and I think I usually saved stuff for bosses. Like I never really used them on regular enemies too much. So
when the bad guys died, was it almost always randomized drops? Because I didn't really ever get a chance to notice any patterns.
I noticed some enemies dropped certain things more often. Like you defeat the goblins, you're more likely to get fish. You defeat the slimes, you either get like fillet or money. Or steak, yeah. It's so they're sort of random, but they also each enemy type seems to have a certain type. And I guess it's also kind of funny with the enemies that have projectiles or even just attacking each other. They can hit each other and damage one another. So that was kind of fun strategy as well. It's like leading them to attack each other while you go in and get a bunch. Like it. Once you got the hang of it, combat felt pretty good.
Yeah, agreed. And I did notice the same thing about the item drops too. I think there was definitely some patterns there from drops. So I did notice that, Derrick.
And I think the thing about the combat that I did like the most was honestly the bosses. The bosses felt way better, like leagues better than the random enemy NPCs that you just run into in like a random room. I really liked there was like a knight near the end.
Mm-hmm.
He was like in pieces kind of, but he was really fun to fight.
Yeah, he'd like launch forward and grab your arm, like launch his arm forward, grab you, pull you in, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely get a lot of different bosses in this one, and it just ended up being fun. Like sometimes they could be a pain in the butt, for sure. But once you got their patterns down, it's not too bad. Like, believe it or not, at some point you fight a tank in this game. It's tough, but once you figure out where you need to hit it and how you need to avoid it and all that, it's not too bad of a fight, but it's just sort of that wild thing where you're fighting a tank.
Yeah.
It was bonkers. I didn't know what happened. I was like, we're in a medieval Europe, ? And suddenly I was transported to a samurai dojo. And I'm like, hello?
Ninjas everywhere.
Yeah, oh my God. The ninjas were so much more aggressive than anything else.
I know. Yeah. There's that whole like basement level was crazy and unexpected. I also like that was an area where you had to like walk into teleported you into these different worlds, and I, for the life of me, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out how to get to each world.
I was able to get to 7 of the 8, and I had to look up like, okay, what is the method that's actually working here? Because I'm getting there, but I can't find this last one. And it turned out that it's a dial, and you have to. There's one part that actually points towards each one, and I was like, I somehow didn't get that at all.
Yeah, I just ended up like randomly figuring out that it was just based on the 8 directions that you could walk into, and yeah, I don't think there was any sort of indicator or nothing that told you that that's how it worked.
Nope.
You just kind of had to figure that out or check a guide.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about older games is that typically it's a lot more difficult for you to actually figure out what's going on because they didn't really spell things out like they do today. So having to go back with that mindset after being in modern gaming world, I was like, this is a lot more difficult than like a modern game today. But
this
coddle. Just
coddle me.
Yeah.
The puzzles in this game, I have never seen such a range of puzzles, because we talked about how there's a lot of pushing puzzles. Get this bomb to explode at this point, or push this button with this boulder or stone or what have you. And those feel kind of typical. They can be tricky for sure. But then you get to certain puzzles, like in floor number 2, right off the bat, like it just gets you, like, okay, time for some pain, where you have like these 4 different places you need to go in order to figure out different puzzles of stuff you got in order to continue on. And the one that will stick out the most to me is the music box. I suck at music. I am awful at it, but I just happen to be playing in bed with Amy, and I know she has an ear for music much more than I did, and I would play it and then hit the pieces that you need in order to recreate it. And that, I'm like shocked. There's like 8 or 9 notes that you have to remember and get in the right order. I'm like, thank God for you, because otherwise I'd have to look this up. I knew what I had to do. I just didn't have the ear for it because it just played too quickly.
It's like Undertale, like that little like raindrop part.
Yeah.
I think it was the RGBY. What was that? It RGBY
Yep.
That puzzle. I literally, I swear, I just did a combination my first try and I got it without getting all of the scrolls beforehand.
That's amazing.
So I didn't realize like what was going on. I'm like, okay, because there's also puzzles in like the first floor where it's like, answer the riddle or whatever. It does that little voice, and you just had to like hit the lights and they would turn on, and that would solve the puzzle.
It was the worst puzzle in the whole wide world, and I was like, is this it? Is this all I'm gonna get from this game?
Yeah. So I thought when I did that with the RGBY puzzle, I thought the rest of them were going to be similar. So I think there was one that was like northwest, east, south, and you had to move the little thing around. I was like, okay, now I'm stuck. Now what do I do?
You got to find that piece of information that says news, or talk to that certain person that says news, so you know the directions to point it in and all that stuff. The clues are there. It's just you have to find them.
Yep.
Very early Zelda like cryptic messages, vague things that are going to come up like 6 hours later. Not that it takes that long to play this game, but you know what I mean. Apparently the game in and of itself is like 5 hours long.
Somewhere around there. It might take me a little longer because I was trying as much as possible to not use a guide. So I'd say 6 to 10 hours based on how stuck you get and how much you want to figure it out on your own. If you just look it up, or if you get stuck, you'll get through this on the lower end. It's not a super long game, which I think it works to its benefit because I found the second half of the floors much more interesting and entertaining than the first half. Some of those puzzles were just too much. Like the one clue you got was penumbra. I don't know what that means. I had no idea. It turns out it's like the order you had to organize the pillars in. Okay, sure.
Yeah. There was puzzles at some point where I definitely had to look at a guide, and I feel like the first half was a lot less creative than the second half of the floors. Like once you got to those like last 4, 5, 6, it started to like really like change things up, and then especially with floor 5, that was basically like a combat area. I mean, but there was also things that did have puzzles in them, so it really mixed things up more towards the end of the game, which I thought was cool.
Now the first part was like baby puzzles. It was literally just
light up these lights. Come on. All you gotta do is just no order, just light them up. Do it.
I was like, this was easy, and then you get to the later ones. It's like, oh, I have to use my brain. Or I gotta say, when I was early on, I was trying to solve everything and just clear out every floor. And then by the end, the floors got so big, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna go, just keep going. And I found most of the stuff. I missed one health upgrade and a few pieces of equipment, but I didn't feel unprepared.
Being a Metroid person, I had to collect like everything in that game. And honestly, though, the map is really good.
It's a very good map.
It shows you all the doors that you haven't gone through in every area. And I guess the only thing it doesn't show you is some secret rooms that you have to kind of figure out on your own. But I got everything except for one of the pieces of armor, which is the one that you had to buy, I think, in the shop. Oh, okay. I never bought that one. But everything else I think I got. And it's really weird that maybe it was just me, but I feel like you got the Light Crusader, which is the best weapon in the game, earlier than like 2 or 3 other weapons.
I think so. Like, didn't you get at the end of floor 4?
I think so, something like that. So they kind of gave you the best weapon so early.
It's right after the night guy. The guy is in pieces.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So you fight him. It's like, you are the ultimate warrior. Time for you to take on the last combats. And it's like, here's your sword. I'm like, all right, thank you.
Thanks. It's earlier than I expected, but
yeah.
I mean,
I got the title of the game. I've won. No, you've got like 2 hours left.
No. You got to fight through World War II now and Japanese feudalism, and I don't even know what else.
A highway.
Some future grid world.
Yeah.
To go through Tron. That's what you need
literally.
to do now. Fight skeletons in the dark. I love the imaginativeness of the end. It's why I'm glad I pushed through to reach it, because I only beat it last night because I'm like, okay, I'm so close. I want to just get to it. So I beelined it as like, just if I could go forward, I went forward. I didn't focus too much on puzzles for the last bit. And you get to the end, and man, that final boss is a joke.
It is. It's insane how easy it was. Especially like I thought the lead up to it was cool because I don't remember like the antagonist's name in the black robe.
Oh no, he has a really funny pun name. It's Ragnarok.
Okay.
Ragnarok.
Weird. But yeah, no, he's just like the reason that all these villagers had been taken was because they needed to be sacrificed to revive the final boss or something like that. And then at the end, he's just like, well, everybody's saved. Guess what? I'm going to revive, or I
only need to sacrifice one person. It just has to be me.
Yeah. And then he dies, and the boss is just like the easiest thing in the world. So I don't know if that says something about him or...
I love that he kind of, after you beat the boss, he kind of like is still somehow alive, and he goes, it's essentially like, what the hell? And then actually dies.
Yeah. He does like this weird animation. He just like squiggle, or like, I don't know what he does. He's like, he's just like slightly moving
Mhm.
while he's talking. I don't know. It's very, very weird.
You find out, because I will say that for a game like this where it's just you going through a singular dungeon, getting through the floors, fighting through enemies, solving puzzles, there's a decent amount of story here. I forget a lot of it because it's spread out so much and it's not really that engaging. But basically, you're David. You get to this place. You find out that I think you're supposed to be on vacation, but you get to the place you're vacationing, and they're like, "Oh, hey, we're in
the
trouble."
beginning, he's like, I'm gonna be on vacation. The king's like, I'm having issues. All right.
People are gone.
My people are being taken away. Can you find them? Okay, I'll go find them. And then you start getting into it, and you're like, oh, there's something weird about this guild going on. We should really investigate that. And you get more and more clues as you go on, and here's a stone tablet that tells you about this ancient god. You got to get that translated by the princess and get further in. And then it turns out the leader of this guild, Ragnarok, was like, he was in love with the queen. His name is the king, and the queen chose the king instead. So he went off and formed the guild, built up his army, and then he's doing all this just so he's like, because he got rejected.
Yep.
The plot of Danny Phantom.
You know, you're not wrong.
Whatever his name is, the guy who's also like a ghost, but
Yeah, Vlad Plasmius. God,
Yes.
I can't remember. I remember that. Oh, God.
so
But
what
yeah,
we're saying is Butch Hartman stole this game's plot for Danny
Man,
Phantom.
what if?
I mean, it would not surprise me. But yeah, it's really funny, but I kind of dug it. I don't know. There's it's not a perfect game by any means. There are issues definitely for its age, but also for its age, this feels like a kind of a hidden gem for the Genesis.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I have such issues with the portraits, everybody being just the most heinously hideous human you could ever engage with. But the entire game in and of itself was actually quite charming. Like, I loved the graphics. There was a lot of really interesting animation, especially for the prisoners. Like, I don't know, I really liked how it looked. And the puzzles too, like, had these cool, like, kind of 3D-esque, like 2.5D elements to them.
Yeah.
You get a costume. You get to dress up as one of the goblins and can interact with them.
I was gonna mention that. I was
Yeah,
just
there
gonna
you
say,
go. Sorry.
but also to go off Amanda's point, like there was some like really cool visual effects in this game, like 3D things, like the thing she said you spin around, like that's like it looks like it's all in 3D, and like some crystals and stuff look like they're in 3D. So stuff that I wouldn't expect from the Genesis. And this is exactly the type of game that like I feel like a game club style thing like this is like perfect for, because like I said during the intro, I was like, I have no idea what this game is. I didn't know anything about it at all. So jumping in and being surprised and just really enjoying what I played, I beat it in like 3 or 4 days, I think. So I was invested. Really, really cool. And then yeah, like you said, the little ogre town that you go into, you get to find an ogre costume and you walk around and you talk to other ogres. They're like, you smell like a human.
Let me open this door for you randomly.
Yeah. And if you're not wearing the costume, they'll attack. If you are, they won't attack you and stuff like that. So it's cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this game that just surprised me.
And they didn't need to add any of those details in there. It's just really fun. They didn't, like, I don't know. Like, for a game that's so short, it has a lot of stuff jam-packed inside of it.
There doesn't feel like there's any fat. I think that's the best way to put it. It's there's, you can definitely spend some extra time if you want to find everything. You don't get a lot of money in this game if you want to buy all the stuff, but they always give you plenty of opportunity to go back to town in order to get what you might need. I never talked to the hint guy because I don't know. I always found like I kind of could solve it. That said, there's some pushing puzzles that are a bitch. Like they are so precise, and you can easily that's when I started doing the rewind. Is like, oh god, I made the one mistake. Rewind and let me just get to it a lot quicker.
I forgot about the rewind so many times.
No.
I went back and forth between rooms when I messed up like that.
Sometimes I would. Other times, if I'm kind of far in the process, I just reset. But this is also my 5th episode, so I am used to rewinding at this point.
Sure.
And I yelled so many times to David, you have hands. Move it away from the wall.
That explains why he looks like that. He uses his face to push.
It would like
Dang, it
just
all
get
makes
jammed
sense.
into the corner, and obviously once it is jammed into the corner, it cannot go in any other direction. And I'm
Right.
just like,
You're stuck.
just push it away. Push it.
Just grab it for the love of God. Stop slashing it. Just grab it and pull, or something like.
Yeah.
Also, it made me laugh that I'm trying to talk to an NPC and I accidentally swing the sword and it just be ow.
Yeah. Or oops or something.
Or,
like,
oops,
I don't
that's
remember what
it
he
might
said.
be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
It's okay. His hand's gone now, but at least he can talk to you.
Yeah. Oh, that
It's just
reminds me. There's
refreshing.
some gruesome deaths in here. No blood or anything like that, but you like cut off the heads of the goblins to cut them in half.
Yeah.
Like, holy crap.
Yeah. That was cool to me. I was like, yeah, that's awesome.
And it was interesting too, because I actually put in the effort to make them unique. Like, it wasn't always decapitating the goblin.
Right.
It was like you could decapitate him or slice him in half, and it was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Usually,
Yeah.
you just see one.
And
Like,
different enemies had different death animations, and you get some weird bosses like the gross fairy that you had to fight as one of the like things like the second to last
Oh,
boss. He was way
yeah.
harder.
Oh, geez, that thing was oof. I will say, I love a lot of the boss designs in this game. I thought they were, as I said
It's
earlier,
a hallmark of treasure.
I just love weird, crazy things like that. Which is also why the final boss was a little bit a lot bit disappointing, because it was just kind of like a dragon that stood still.
Yeah, since you didn't get that far, Amanda, basically he has 4 orbs. You cut down each of the 4 orbs, and you happen to be right at level for each of them, so it's not really that much of an effort. Once the orbs are gone, you slash at his face and dodge his easily dodgeable projectiles.
oh,
Yeah.
well,
That's it.
that is disappointing because it just sounds like that one dragon boss. I mean, that one's also got different elevations anyway, so why would they make it less hard?
That one dragon boss, you fight it twice, don't you? I forgot
think
where you
so,
fight
yeah.
it again. But that one is more interesting than the final boss to me.
Yeah.
It was at least you have to do some jump attacks and stuff like that, like precise ones. But yeah, other than that though, I thought most of the boss designs were really cool, and would have loved if they
You
took it
fight
even
Metal
weirder
Gear, I just
direction.
remembered. You fight a Metal Gear in that 7th floor. Like
That's
there's
true.
a mech that you take
true.
down. It's crazy. But
They had some very weird, like most of the time it was just like the same looking dungeon for most of it, which was one of the more unappealing parts. But then once you got down to like the lower levels and you started to see those weird, like the Samurai Dojo thing, or like the highway, or the future, or the Tron. But for a lot of it, it was kind of like very similar looking, which may have been less of a, I guess, like a design issue. Just like, let's just save all of the best stuff for the end.
yeah.
But-
I will also say music, very forgettable. I couldn't tell you a tune.
Yeah.
I liked it while I was playing it, but yeah, nothing stuck in my head. I thought it fit well, but I think there was sometimes, like especially towards the beginning of those areas, that it was very like atmospheric, which I thought was nice. It was I enjoy things that are atmospheric, similar to Metroid. So I mean, like that was good, but like you said, not really memorable.
And it wasn't really, there were no melodies particularly. It was just kind of like, and the biggest problem that I run into with a lot of games like this is that you are in one room and the song goes, and then you enter another room and it restarts, and you're like, I'll never hear this song because these rooms are this big.
Sure. I
Very
think
true.
the one I remember the most is just the castle theme, weirdly enough.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not gonna hum it, but
No.
I really
Oh,
liked
good.
the menu theme, like when you did the start button to go and look at things. It
I was
felt
checking that map a lot.
yeah, me too.
that start menu music felt like Harvest Moony almost. It sounded very Harvest Moony,
Yeah. No, I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Yeah. like a fall theme.
There you go.
Specific.
All right. Well, I believe we've said all we've wanted to say about Light Crusader, but what's our final verdict? Would you recommend it as an N yes O, or tell people to stay away with an N oh no? Naveed, let's begin with you.
I'm gonna do my little dance that David does at the end of every boss and say and yes, oh.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. What about you, Amanda?
Absolutely. And yes, I would recommend this to people who just want to have a nice perusal down some nice Genesis titles. because I had never really played any Genesis titles before this, like I said in the intro. So this was nice. I liked this.
Absolutely. I agree. It's 3 for 3 NSO. Nice little surprise for the Genesis. It's you'd see a game called Light Crusader and be like, I don't know about that. But no, it's treasure. It's a good game. Go figure. So I definitely enjoyed it quite a bit. Dan Alpha Lying saying best game so far. I wish I had played all of Shining Force to really say one way or the other, but it's definitely top tier. It's great to have this after Bamboozle. So I will say that.
I can only imagine.
I'm happy for you, Derrick. I'm happy for you to get this.
I'm happy for you
that.
guys. You didn't have to suffer. But
what was the other one? I forget what the other one could have possibly been.
Right.
The
spin.
hypothetical ones that we do for fun, just on occasion. I forget. I think it was Toe Jam and Earl was the other hypothetical.
That's possible.
Super Punch Out is well.
Super Punch Out. That was the other one. That's it. That's
Alpha Line. Yep.
We'll get to those eventually. There's a lot. There's a lot out there, and after we did our thing, Excitebike came out, so it's always more coming. So
yep.
But what about all of you? Have you played Light Crusader before, or was this your first time? And before we go, where can everyone find you at, Amanda? Where can plug away? Where can they find you at?
You guys can find me at twitch.tv/Digimanda. That's Digimanda. I couldn't spell my own name for a second.
That's fine. And what about you, Naveed?
I'm on YouTube, Naveed Mohebbi. It's just my name. And I also started a second channel recently, just Naveed Collects, where I do more like video game collection style videos. And then Twitter is pretty much the same. So
look at all those games, Naveed.
That's a lot of games. Like I'm quite jealous.
Too many.
That's not possible. That's not possible. Hey, at least we knocked another one off your backlog. I don't think you own this game, so
I don't, but I wouldn't mind owning it now.
There you go. Well, thank you both for joining me. And if all of you lovely viewers enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments, and please consider supporting us at patreon.com/gvgaming, which includes our live audience tier that will allow you to watch Game Club live as it's being recorded. But even just subscribing and hitting that bell helps us a ton. But now it's time for the Wheel of Games to choose next week's title, as I'm joined by my special guests, Masayanella and Rebecca Stone. Are you both ready to see what game we're playing?
Heck yeah.
Absolutely.
Hit me with it.
Little nervous.
Let's go.
Yep. All right. Bringing up the Wheel of Games, clicking the spin, and let's see what we get. As the wheel spins, it is going to land on... Oh my god, I think we're getting another Genesis game. Sword of Vermilion for the Sega Genesis.
This is something I've never heard of.
And there you have it. We'll see you next time as we cover Sword of Vermilion for the Sega Genesis. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye.